Today, we're going to look at taxes, but through a totally different lens. Not just as an economic thing, but as a moral statement. We're going to deconstruct a pretty powerful argument that puts fairness and justice right at the center of the whole tax debate.
So this really is the big question, isn't it? Are taxes just about economics? Revenue, efficiency, numbers on a spreadsheet? Or is there something deeper, something more fundamental going on? Well, the argument we're digging into today says, oh yeah, there is. And it changes everything.
So here's our game plan. We'll start with the traditional way of thinking about taxes. Then we'll hit a crucial turning point. After that, we'll get to the real heart of the matter, figure out where economics fits in, and finally piece together a whole new blueprint for how to think about tax policy. All right, first up, the common assumption. Let's talk about the framework that has shaped tax debates for a very long time. For decades, when lawmakers sat down to write tax laws, they were laser-focused on a couple of things: economics and history. They looked at data, they looked at what was done before, they ran the financial models. But what got left out of the conversation? The really big moral questions about what's fair and what's just. So why? Why did these huge moral issues get pushed to the side? Well, the source gives us three main reasons. People would say they were just too controversial to even bring up, or they were just way too difficult to answer. And maybe the most revealing one of all, they were often considered completely irrelevant to the job of writing tax law. Okay, but get ready, because here's where the entire story flips. This is the turning point, where that old-school conventional wisdom gets challenged in a big way. And this one quote says it all. But in fact, the moral questions of taxation are at the very heart of the creation of tax laws. That phrase, the very heart, that's the whole ballgame. The argument isn't just that morality is a part of tax policy, it's that it's the absolute center, it's the core. So the takeaway here is really simple, but it's huge. Moral questions aren't just a side issue. They're fundamental to the whole idea of imposing a tax. They're not some optional add-on. According to this line of thinking, morality is the bedrock that the entire system of taxation has to be built on. Okay, so if morality is the foundation, then what's the main principle that holds it all together? Well, that brings us right to the heart of the matter.
If you remember one key term from this whole explainer, make it this one: distributive justice. It sounds complicated, but it's really just about how a society puts its ideas about fairness into action. It's about how we decide to divide up resources and wealth. And, of course, every society has a different idea of what fair looks like.
And here is where it all clicks. The source argues that tax is the application of distributive justice. It's the main tool we use to turn our ideas about fairness into reality. And once you see it that way, well, it becomes impossible to separate taxes from morality. They're two sides of the same coin. Now, you might be thinking, so is economics useless then? Not at all. It just means we have to be super clear about what economics is for, understanding both its incredible power and its very real limits. So what can economics do? It's amazing at figuring out efficiency. It can tell us if a certain tax law will actually achieve its goal. It gives us all the data we need. But what can't it do? It can't tell us what the goal should be in the first place. Think of it like this. Economics is the GPS that can show you the fastest route, but morality is what you use to pick the destination. All right, all of this leads us to our final section. Let's put all these pieces together and build a brand new blueprint for how we should think about tax policy. This new blueprint is actually a pretty straightforward four-step logic. Step 1 is the problem. For a long time, we've ignored moral questions. Step 2, the correction, but in reality, morality is fundamental. Step 3 is the reason why. Economics is a tool for efficiency, but it can't set our goals. And that all leads to the big conclusion in Step 4, tax policy must begin with a moral analysis. And this final quote just wraps it all up perfectly. Creating tax policy requires identifying a moral goal, which is a task that must involve ethics and moral analysis. The point is, the conversation about taxes shouldn't start with spreadsheets. It has to start with a much bigger, much more important question. What does a fair and just society actually look like to us? So I'll leave you with a final thought to chew on. This way of thinking isn't really just about taxes. It's a template for how we can connect powerful tools with a moral purpose. So the real question is, Where else in our society is this partnership between economic logic and moral values not just helpful, but absolutely essential? Thanks for joining me.